In the hot summer of 324 BCE, a 44-year-old scholar and teacher of political economy walked into the grand imperial court of the Nanda Empire in Pataliputra. Chanakya had spent his entire life cultivating absolute intellectual depth at the University of Takshashila. He entered the assembly to deliver a high-accuracy, strategic risk warning regarding the advancing border movements of Alexander the Great. But when he stood before the monarch, Dhananand, the drunken emperor, and his circle of foolish courtiers, who always alienated wise scholars, mocked Chanakya's appearance, stripped him of his honors, and publicly threw him out of the palace gates. His ancient, sacred standard of honor was answered with a brutal public character humiliation right in front of the regional assembly. The coarse mind, when hit by this scale of unprovoked close-range ambush, panics. It stays trapped on its knees inside a bitter environment, writing panic-stricken words to explain its intent, begging a corrupt crowd for validation, or exhausting its valuable life force in a disorderly immediate brawl. But Chanakya had executed an absolute truce of non-seeking. He stood on the dirt road outside the palace, untied his top knot as a singular inner vow of judgment, and walked completely away from their palace. He did not scream back at the guards, nor did he allow their petty, distorted opinions to siphon a single drop of his far-sightedness. He retreated into the absolute stillness of the Vindhya forests, leaving the muddy water of their public consensus entirely alone. He understood a rigid, unchanging law of human networks. The collective opinion of a versatile crowd carries absolute zero factual mass because it is merely the pooled anxiety of crude people trying to portray their own limitations onto a world-class vessel. Chanakya refused to force their bigoted minds to understand his caliber. He built an impregnable psychological vault, an inner citadel, so secure that the chaotic noise of their insults completely faded into absolute nothingness. From that zero disclosure forest sanctuary, he quietly trained an outcast youth named Chandragupta, engineering an invulnerable new architecture that eventually dissolved the Nanda dynasty and construct the borderless Maurya Empire. The philosopher Lao Tzu mirrored the exact structural parameters loop in the Tao Te Ching, hard-coding the verified law into chapter 15. Who can make muddy water clear? Let it be still, and it will gradually become clear. Who can secure a state of repose? Let it move, and it will gradually come to life. Consider a profound biological example, the phenomenon of sleep. The exact millisecond a human being lies down on their bed and aggressively tries to force themselves to fall asleep, counting the remaining hours, straining their eyes closed, and constantly checking the clock panel, the brain initializes a stress response. The active chasing of sleep releases cortisol, locking the nervous system into a state of hypervigilance that pushes the sleep baseline miles away from the edge. Sleep can never be captured through a desperate chase. It can only execute when you completely abandon the pursuit. lower your mental resistance, and allow the body to naturally drift into its native state of rest. The Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca outlined this exact systemic spiral in his Moral Letters to Lucilius, Letter 13, explicitly writing the authenticated words. There are more things, Lucilius, likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. In this letter, Seneca tells us that we worry about future disasters, failures, or pains that feel heavy in our minds. Most of the terrible things we picture in our heads never actually happen. The imagination. For 3 days before the meeting, the manager cannot sleep. They picture tripping on the stage, forgetting their words, and getting fired. Their stomach knots up, their hands sweat, and they experience genuine physical and mental exhaustion days before the event even happens. The reality. The manager gives the presentation. They stumble slightly on one slide but quickly correct themselves. The executives nod, ask two standard questions, and move on to the next topic. No one laughs and no one gets fired. The presentation was slightly stressful, but it did not crush them. However, the manager spent 3 entire days suffering intensely in their imagination for a catastrophe that never existed. They punished themselves in advance. The 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, in his definitive work "Parerga and Paralipomena", Schopenhauer hard-coded a raw mathematical law regarding the absolute irrelevance of public consensus, explicitly writing the verified words: "Our happiness depends on our whole existence, and what we are is most essential. On the other hand, what we represent in the eyes of others is a subordinate matter. To place a high value on the opinions of others is a universal mania." Imagine you are dressing up for a major event like a wedding, a party, or a formal dinner. You pick out a stunning outfit or a pair of high-end dress shoes. What you represent to everyone else in the room, you look incredible. You look sharp, stylish, wealthy, and successful. People smile, compliment you, and tell you how great you look. What you are? Your feet are blistering. The waist is suffocatingly tight. You can barely breathe, and you are secretly counting down the minutes until you can go home and put on sweatpants. Schopenhauer pointed out that we cannot feel other people's compliments, but we can feel our own physical pain. All the admiration from the crowd cannot stop your feet from hurting. No matter how grand you look to the world, your actual reality in that moment is pure discomfort. Schopenhauer argues that we spend too much of our lives letting our feet bleed just so strangers can admire the shoes. Let us become wiser every day by following the teachings and lives of these great people and improve our lives for the better. Thank you for watching. Let's explore this path together.